The economy, the most important issue for most Americans. The consumer is still the largest driver of our economy, regardless of everyday expenses going up. Yet, they show less confidence in the economy. Some argue that the consumer is doing well enough, that has the money to spend on things they want. Others warn that consumers are spending, but on necessities, not on wants. But here's something you may not know. Americans are $19 trillion in debt right now. That's over $105,000 per household. So, is the consumer driving the economy, or are they driving it into a ditch? Today, we're going to ask our cyber counselors to weigh in on what they think is going on in the consumer's mind. So, the council is now in session.
The consumer isn't driving the economy forward. He's the fuel being burned to keep a debt-leveraged, attention-extracting machine humming. Most of what we call consumer spending is just finance consumption. Credit cards, stretched auto loans, and rolled-over debt masquerading as real demand. Strip away the stimulus and easy credit, and a lot of this growth is simply borrowing from tomorrow to look strong today. Look at trucks. People signing $800 a month payments on 84-month loans for vehicles they can barely afford. The industry celebrates record sales and GDP ticks up, but household debt service ratios climb while quality slips and maintenance costs rise. The implication is brittle. When credit tightens or wages stall, the whole engine coughs. Consumers aren't steering this system. They're responding to engineered desire and financial incentives that make saving feel like losing. We've turned the consumer into the mark in a sophisticated, self-reinforcing con.
The U.S. consumer is currently engaged in a structural debt bridging operation, where credit is utilized to offset the erosion of real purchasing power. This behavior marks a transition from consumption fueled by surplus income to consumption sustained by high-interest liabilities. Households are increasingly adopting buy now, pay later services for everyday essentials. This pattern mirrors the credit-driven expansions of the late 1920s, where the proliferation of installment plans artificially extended economic momentum long after organic wage growth had peaked. The systemic implication is a fundamental loss of material stability. The economy now functions as a high-interest refinancing engine. This creates a fragile architecture that is highly vulnerable to minor disruptions in the labor market.
The consumer strength narrative has a structural problem at its core. We keep hearing that spending is holding the economy together, and technically, that's true. But when you ask why people are spending, the answer starts to undermine the conclusion. Real wages have recovered in some sectors, yes. But a significant and growing portion of consumer spending is being carried by credit. Credit card balances are at record highs, delinquency rates are climbing, and the savings rate has fallen sharply from its post-pandemic peak. So the spending is real, but the foundation it's sitting on is not what the headline number implies. Here's the logical contradiction: if consumer spending is evidence of strength, but that spending requires increasing debt to sustain, then what you're actually measuring is the willingness to borrow, not the capacity to absorb cost. Those are very different things. One is a signal of confidence. The other is a signal of pressure. The forces acting on consumers right now are compressive elevated prices that haven't fully reversed, higher interest rates making debt more expensive to carry, and a labor market that, while still functional, is softening at the margins. People are spending because they have to, or because they've decided the debt is manageable. Neither of those is the same as spending from a position of genuine strength. The narrative is measuring output and calling it health. That's the flaw.
You can tell a lot about an economy by what people do when the paycheck arrives. Right now, many Americans aren't getting ahead. They're trying not to fall behind. Consumer spending has stayed surprisingly strong, but that doesn't automatically mean consumers feel financially secure. For many households, higher wages have been absorbed by higher costs for housing, insurance, groceries, and borrowing. Credit has become a way to preserve normal life rather than expand it. That makes today's consumer remarkably resilient, but also increasingly vulnerable. Resilience can carry an economy for a while. It cannot replace financial stability forever. When survival starts looking like success, it's time to ask whether we're measuring the right thing.
So there we go. Those are our initial thoughts in the council. What do you think? How do they compare to your own opinions? Join us in our next segment when the council debates their own answers, find the merits or lack thereof among their arguments. See you then.